It's My Nerd World, a Star Wars show. On this week's episode, we have some details about Rogue Squadron, kind of leading to its demise. We had a report come out about the upcoming Rey Skywalker-centric new Jedi Order film, Episode 10, as I've been calling it. Created all kinds of hype, but it turns out it may have all been fake, which has me wondering, are we really sure that fans hated The Rise of Skywalker? Plus, listener feedback this week. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. As always, if you want to find out more about My Nerd World and the science fiction space opera series EMBARK, head on over to mynerdworld.net.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
Welcome to the show, a Star Wars show. My name is Jon Justice. Thanks for checking out this week's episode. If you want to email, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment there, like and subscribe the channel. Hit the little alarm so you get updates. I hope you had a chance to check out my bonus My Nerd World episode on how to save the modern blockbuster. Bit of a grandiose title, but it was my idea of bringing back the uniqueness, the special experience of going to see your modern blockbuster, with the way that we go and talk about these films, the amount of news that gets released. And this is something I did not get into in much detail in this special bonus podcast. I will on this episode because of a Star Wars show, because it absolutely applies to some of what I want to talk about this week. But basically my idea that, for example, if my science fiction series EMBARK were to be optioned for a film, how I would like to see it promoted, the marketing around it, creating this idea of scarcity once again, making it special by only revealing just enough to get people excited, to create a bit of mystery again around these films. We know so much about the production of these projects that we love that I really feel like the fandom just kind of ruins the entire experience. We can no longer go and enjoy movies for just being movies. And again, this is what I want to talk about a bit in this week's episode. So we'll dive into some of the rumors that have been floating around. This production leak, doing that thing with my fingers that came out, that turns out that it's bogus. Not a huge surprise, but what's interesting to me is that it created quite a bit of buzz over the course of the past few days. Now, granted, there's not a lot going on in the world of Star Wars. I'll tell you about the what we can expect next in terms of Star Wars content ahead of Ahsoka, but we have a bit of a lull right now after getting quite a bit of Star Wars, over the course of the past year. Did have a chance to watch the new Marvel series, Secret Invasion, the first episode. So Disney is obviously focusing on that show right now ahead of the August release of Ahsoka. And I'll just say that I really enjoyed the first episode of Secret Invasion. I've been rather bored, to be honest, with a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe content that's been coming out. Just a lot of the last phase of the movies just hasn't really done anything for me. None of the shows, the live action streaming shows, have really sort of, I've watched them all and I've enjoyed them, but a lot of which I'm not going back and rewatching. The most recent Ant-Man movie was just okay. We had every intention of watching it again now that it's on the Disney Plus, streaming platform, but we haven't watched it again. We recently did a rewatch of Thor: Love and Thunder, and while I enjoyed watching it for what it was, really I had the same chief complaints that I did the first time I saw it. It just didn't really land for me. I did quite enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, so I'll give some praise to that movie. I know my wife and I really did enjoy that one, and it was probably the closest to what we had really enjoyed in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, apart from the last phase. But for the most part, it hasn't really, I haven't really been hyped for it. We actually waited a few days before we watched Secret Invasion. Now, that being said, I did enjoy the first episode for what it was. I thought it was a bit of a departure from what we had typically seen of the Marvel live-action shows. Don't know if it's something that I'll be rewatching, but I am definitely looking forward to next week's episode. So, all that being said, let's get into some of the Star Wars news and some details on just what in the heck am I talking about.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So next week, Disney Gallery will be dropping the Mandalorian Season 3 documentary. Of course, they do this for all of the Mandalorian seasons. Mentioned this before, I'll mention it again. I really appreciated Mandalorian Season 1's Disney Gallery because they devoted an episode of Disney Gallery to every single one of the episodes of The Mandalorian. And since then, we've just been getting one special to encompass the entire series. This Disney Gallery for Mandalorian Season 3, I'm very much looking forward to because they're going to be highlighting Phil Tippett's involvement in the series, specifically his work in the mines of Mandalore. For those that are not aware, Phil Tippett goes back to the original trilogy days as a model maker. He was one of the chief designers and puppeteers for the Rancor. To give you one example, he was also the individual who designed the pieces on the gaming table inside of the Millennium Falcon. So he's been just a legend within Star Wars creation. And so the Mandalorian Season 3 Disney Gallery is going to be highlighting some of his work on the Mandalorian Season 3. So I'm very much looking forward to checking that out next week. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Ahsoka will be dropping later in the month in August. All right, let's dive into some of the rumors this week. And I'm going to ask the question, are we sure that people really hated the Rise of Skywalker the way that they said they did?
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, I got a couple of stories here from Bespin Bulletin. We'll start off with the now currently shelved Rogue Squadron, which I still contend that Rogue Squadron ended up being shelved because of what had happened with Top Gun Maverick. And I think that Rogue Squadron story was probably pretty close to something that we end up seeing in Top Gun Maverick. But who knows? According to my sources, says Bespin Bulletin, Patty Jenkins' husband and former Merchant Marine, Sam Sheridan, the writer of the TNT series I Am the Night, which also starred Chris Pine, and a consulting producer on Amazon Prime Video's Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, which I quite enjoyed, penned a draft of Star Wars Rogue One. Despite his television work, Sheridan is probably best known for being an established author, releasing books including A Fighter's Heart, One Man's Journey into the World of Fighting, and kind of reminds me of Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Crime Scene of the Crime. A Fighter's Heart, One Man's Journey into the World of Fighting. And the Disaster Stories, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Apocalypse. My sources, Bespin Bulletin writes, didn't state if it was a draft of a film script, a TV plot, or drafts of a TV series. Just that Sheridan at some point worked on a draft of Rogue Squadron. But given his history with TV, I can't help but wonder if he penned a script for the series. So, just a little bit of details on the shelved Rogue Squadron. I will use this and place it with the commentary that I'll provide here in a moment of just finding out entirely too much about these projects before they're cemented or moving forward. And a lot of this comes down to the promotion on Lucasfilm's part. Rogue Squadron was a film that was announced several years ago now in one of the Disney Investor Days, where they did a highlight reel and a promotion of the upcoming projects, a lot of which have fallen by the wayside. Rangers of the New Republic, the Lando series, which we keep being told is still going to happen, but we haven't got any further details on it. And of course, we get this interesting promo with director Patty Jenkins of Wonder Woman fame, where she's in the back of a car, she changes, she puts on an X-Wing fighter pilot helmet and roller skates, goes down a runway where there's a parked, fully constructed, unless it was CGI, X-Wing sitting there, and then that movie just falls by the wayside. I could spend the next 15, 20 minutes going through all of the various productions that got official announcements and just fell by the wayside. I really wish that Lucasfilm and other companies as well would stop, especially Lucasfilm, though, we're talking about Star Wars, would stop with promoting these projects without, making sure that they are for sure going to happen, because it just ruins the faith in the fandom. And this, again, you can couple with a sort of an addendum to the bonus podcast I did a few days ago on how we should go about in promoting blockbuster films and stripping away, or at least eliminating, all of the leaks that take place and all the behind-the-scenes stuff that ends up creating hours upon hours of negative content by fans who go and report this news and end up making an editorial review of a film before it even comes out. All right, let's get into the next bit of news, which is, again, something else I'm talking about. Now, this was probably something that was made up by a fan, but I'll give you the initial report of what came out earlier this week. With the release of their latest digital issue, Production Weekly has listed a start date for filming on the untitled Star Wars movie being written by Stephen Knight, Peaky Blinders. Now, again, we already know the backstory on this, and we never should have known this. I don't know if it's possible to put a clamp down on these leaks to stop them anymore. Pre-internet, it was easy to do because the information just never got out into the public. By the time something was written in a magazine about a film, you already had production photos from the actual film to promote what was coming up. And I remember as a kid going to the library and getting a magazine and seeing my first images from Star Wars Return of the Jedi. We didn't know back then that there were problems with the director and Richard Marquand and that Lucasfilm. George Lucas had to come in and help with the direction of it. We just knew there was a new Star Wars film coming. But now, for example, with this new Rey focused New Jedi Order film that's going to be released sometime in 2026, we already know that Damon Lindelof of Lost fame and The Watchmen had originally penned a script in which Rey was supposedly an elderly woman, and she was acting as more like a Obi-Wan Kenobi figure, and then he ended up turning in his script, and then he got pitched off the project, and now we got Stephen Knight from Peaky Blinders coming in. So we already have all this baggage on the film that hasn't even gone into production yet. So Production Weekly had listed some details of this movie. Again, being written by Stephen Knight, directed by Shermeen Obaid-Chinoy of Miss Marvel, and a few documentaries, of April of 2024. This was allegedly the start date for filming for the new untitled Rey-focused Star Wars movie. This comes a week after a credible industry insider and journalist, Jeff Snyder, on his podcast, The Hot Mic, said that despite Lucasfilm and Disney delaying the film from December 2025 to May 22nd of 2026, filming was slated to begin in April of next year. Now, Bespin Bulletin went on to say, personally, I don't believe it to be a coincidence that the outlet has now listed an April start date following Snyder's comments. Production Weekly does have their own sources, but frequently list reports from other outlets and sometimes online rumors in their listings if they believe the outlet or person reporting the date to be true or reputable. In addition to listing the Daisy Ridley-led flick for an April start date, they added a brief synopsis. Some of it hobbled together based off of information reported by other outlets and comments made by Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy and director Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, but it features details that have not been previously mentioned publicly. The listing reads set roughly 15 years after Rey's victory over Palpatine and the end of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. The sequel delves into Rey's courageous endeavor to restore the Jedi Order, where she assumes the role of mentor to two promising young students, a girl and a boy. As their training progresses, it becomes evident the girl possesses extraordinary abilities, destined to emerge as a future leader. So this created a bunch of buzz. Now, again, not a lot going on in the world of Star Wars right now. We're past Andor. We're past Visions. Right now, Disney is focused on, as I mentioned, Marvel's Secret Invasion. We only have this documentary coming out, and we've got Ahsoka around the corner in August. So we have a bit of a lull, which I think is a good thing right now when it comes to Star Wars content. However, there was quite a bit of excitement that was generated over the course of the past few days about this listing. And it got me thinking, and this goes back to the podcast that I did the other day. Did people really hate Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker as much as they said they did, or did they just really enjoy talking bad about The Rise of Skywalker? So I'll talk more about that in a moment. First off, though, the whole thing was bogus. Star Wars Newsnet put up a post today, says, a source has told us that the synopsis is not accurate and does not represent the story that writer Stephen Knight was developing for Lucasfilm before the writer's strike was called on May 2nd. We also understand that New Jedi Order is simply a working title of the film and not necessarily the one it will receive. It's possible that they haven't even zeroed in on a title yet. Most likely they haven't, as the script is not even complete yet. The listing by the Production Weekly also cites April of 2024 as the start date in Pinewood and a release date of May 22nd of 2026. We haven't been able to confirm either of these dates, but we understand that these are the tentative dates for now and will likely depend on how the writer's strike evolves. Reporter Jeff Snyder said last week during his Hot Mic podcast that the film was targeting to start filming in that time window. Okay, so it's not a huge surprise. There was actually quite a few typos and grammatical errors in that posting on Production Weekly. So a lot of people were crying foul out of the gate. But it didn't diminish the amount of hype that was generated because of this little bit of information. Now, I want to put a lot of caveats on this, because I don't think that there's a whole bunch of people out there that didn't like The Rise of Skywalker that secretly liked The Rise of Skywalker. But I do think there's a lot of individuals out there that had their view of that film tainted because of the groupthink that I talked quite a bit about in the other podcast. Because it's really easy to sort of fall into this group thought when you've got a bunch of individuals on social media or on YouTube videos that are reinforcing a bunch of ideas. We saw this happen with The Last Jedi. If you go back and watch a lot of prominent commentators in pop culture and movies, you can go back and find that a lot of them talked very positively about The Last Jedi. But then suddenly it became kitschy to go and diss on The Last Jedi. Now, I know there are some people that went back and watched the film several times and perhaps changed their views on it. That can certainly happen. But I can't help but wonder that if we weren't living in a society right now where we weren't privy to all of this backstory information. Going into The Rise of Skywalker, you already had all of the baggage that came with The Last Jedi. So Episode 9 was already going to be at a disadvantage to try to go and be something that everybody can go and rally around. We live in a society right now, whether it's news, sports to a lesser extent, but certainly pop culture. Typically, if something comes out, there are sides that are immediately formed, and people dig their heels in on whichever side they decide to go and take. It's tough to go and find things that people universally enjoy anymore. There are instances where that happens, but I find that it's becoming less and less frequent as time goes on. And I'm looking at all the individuals talking about this potential for this new Jedi Order film with Rey Skywalker, and I have just kind of scratched my head going, but so many of you seem to have hated The Rise of Skywalker. And going into The Rise of Skywalker, we knew that Colin Trevorrow had been pitched off of the film after turning in a script. That script has been leaked online, for crying out loud, so people have even changed their opinions based on that. It's like, well, if it had been Colin Trevorrow's script, then maybe I would have enjoyed it. So we knew that J.J. Abrams came in. There was this thought that suddenly J.J. Abrams was working on a truncated timeline. People went and took that and applied it to their analysis and reviews of the film. And I just wonder that if you remove all that baggage, how people would have gone and assessed that movie. Now, this is coming from a place where I genuinely love The Rise of Skywalker. Is it a perfect film? No, it's not. But of course, no Star Wars is a perfect film. I love The Last Jedi, but there's plenty of ridiculous issues in The Last Jedi. I mean, listen, I'll be honest with you. The whole Leia floating in space and the chase thing, I don't know how any of the physics work out on that. I mean, physics in Star Wars can just kind of go out the window as it is, but they're supposed to be chasing each other through space. She gets blown out into space, but yes, she's floating there and the ship doesn't leave her behind. Like, none of it makes any sense, but the Force doesn't exist, and arcing lasers in space don't make any sense. So I look at it from a standpoint of, am I entertained? Is it so far out of the realm of possibility that it takes me out of the movie? And it doesn't. I go and look at a movie like The Rise of Skywalker, and I know that you listening have your views and opinions on how that story ended up shaking out, especially as it relates to Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and Rey. I, for one, thought that how that relationship was resolved was pretty spot on. I appreciated the way that they handled it, and I agreed with the decisions that were made in that film. People that have gone and taken, they've gone into their editing software and they've superimposed Force ghosts into the final scene with Rey when she faces off against Palpatine, and then you have people watching it going, "See, it should have been that way." Well, but it wasn't that way. When the original trilogy came out, and I said this in the other show, if it had come out now in the way that we go and consume, the way that we go and express our fandom and consume information about the stories and the storytelling and the movies that we love, if it was that way when the original trilogy came out and you had Twitter and you had TikTok and you had YouTube, those movies would have been ripped apart. I mean, they would have been absolutely ripped to shreds. And yet most people will sit back and go, that is the high water mark for Star Wars in the original trilogy. And when I see people getting hyped about a new Rey film and spreading and doing shows around this fake piece of information, which was, again, kind of pretty clear that it was fake, I just had to chuckle to myself and go, did you really hate The Rise of Skywalker all that much? I personally think it is just a fun popcorn Star Wars romp that hits every single Star Wars beat that I am looking for in a Star Wars movie. And I find it just infinitely rewatchable. So I'm probably way out on a limb here. I'm sure that I will get comments from people going, I hated that movie and this is the reason why, and that's fine. I'm not saying your opinion is wrong. I just think a lot more people liked that film than didn't like that film, but you hear the negative more than you do the positive most of the time. All right, speaking of which, let me get to one more item and then we'll get to listener feedback this week.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
So, New Total Film, this is just one of the, movie publications out there, shared an exclusive image of Ahsoka and Hera from the Ahsoka series. And there's been quite a few images that have been released from the Ahsoka series, along with the teaser trailer and the regular trailer. There is actual controversy in shows, podcasts, that there's too much of Ahsoka played by Rosario Dawson, standing there with her arms crossed. I didn't actually think that it was true, but I went and I did some digging around, and sure enough, there were people complaining that Ahsoka crosses her arms too much. See, this is what I'm talking about. Now, it's funny because if I've got to pick a side on this one, I'm going to side with the individuals who say this is a ridiculous argument, and also side with the fact that if you go back and watch the Clone Wars and the vast majority of the animated content that we've already seen of Ahsoka, she crosses her arms all the time. Oh, I probably sound like an old man. I just wish that we were going back to a simpler time when we were told about a movie, we saw the trailer, we went to see it, and we talked about it with our friends. I mean, it was the best. It was the best. You just shared if you loved it or not, and then you moved on. But we don't live in that world anymore. I mean, people have already made decisions about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and it hasn't even been released yet. Speaking of which, I've been doing a rewatch of the Indiana Jones movies, and I still really like Temple of Doom. I get the complaints over it, and even Steven Spielberg said that he, made The Last Crusade as an apology. But I still very much enjoy that movie. But I'm in the middle of watching The Last Crusade, and again, just so absolutely enjoyable. There are some wonky special effects in that movie, though. I mean, you want to talk about making a special edition? I would appreciate if they went back and redid specifically when they take off in the blimp and they have to go and steal the plane to get away from the Nazis, and he's being chased by that. I think it's a P-51. He's being chased by those of the airplane sequence. The effects just absolutely do not hold up. It does add a level of charm to the movie, but it doesn't work. But again, it's not ruining the film for me. It's just one of those things where I wish we can go. You could probably go and plug that scene into your OpenAI, and it could spit out a better AI would spit out a better version of those sequences within a matter of a few minutes. Yeah, AI is going to take over. Terminator was absolutely correct.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, let's get some of your listener feedback this week. Russ writes, people forgetting how to behave at public events, a reason not to have public events. I heard some theaters have a message at the start reminding people that they aren't at home. I had a great time at Transformers last night, but somehow this preview screening only had about 30 people, so there was much less issues. Ironically, we were clustered in the middle, yet the single young person who bought a ticket beside me and had 15 seats beside him didn't feel empowered to move over a few. Of course, being from the age before assigned seating, I would have moved had he not arrived during that last advertisement. Once the film starts and we're kind of into it and nobody's taken those seats, I would have moved by then. Russ, I'm 100% with you, though. The etiquette inside of movie theaters is just atrocious. One of my, not being a talk show host or a full-time podcaster talking this type of stuff, I would love to go and own a movie theater. I have all kinds of different ideas of owning a movie theater and how what I would want it to look like and the type of additions to the movie-going experience that I would want to have. And I can couple this with my saving the modern blockbuster. I love going to the movies, but I feel like the experience has been diluted quite a bit. It's a bummer at the AMC that we go to most often. It's a bit run down, I'm not going to lie. They haven't quite recovered from the pandemic. They don't put up the outside of the theaters with the theater display, the digital display. They don't use those anymore. It's a very small thing, but they don't use them anymore. And they're having a hard time upkeeping on the recliners. But in terms of individuals' etiquette inside theaters, yeah, it's just gotten atrocious. People just talk all the time, and it absolutely drives me nuts. Or they sleep. I had a couple of guys when we went to go see Transformers, and first off, they were just talking up a storm all during the trailers. And I'll give it a pass during the trailers, but it ruins the whole experience because I'm just sitting there going, are they going to keep yapping like this all through the movie? Or are they going to shut up when the movie actually starts? And thankfully, for the most part, they ended up staying quiet, apart from the one guy who fell asleep and was snoring in there. But typically when I go to the theaters now, it's just people on their phones, people talking, and that's the whole reason why I go to the movie theater, so I don't have any distractions, and they don't help me at all. All right, let's talk to and hear from N. Blackie. I think Lucasfilm Disney is scared to death about returning Star Wars to the big screen. After Solo, they know Star Wars is no longer bomb-proof. That failure has shook them to the core. I don't know if Star Wars can survive a monumental flop, which is why it's so odd that they chose to use a Rey movie to spearhead their return. They could have chosen something far less risky. There are so many great story arcs from the Clone Wars animated series that could be adapted to the big screen with great effect if done right. I don't have a good feeling about the Rey movie. What's interesting about the Rey movie, and this goes back to what I've been talking about, that I don't think that... Look, The Rise of Skywalker was still a box office success. It followed the trajectory of the other two trilogies in terms of how much money they ended up making, right? Now, you look at other franchises that have been able to grow sort of exponentially, but even they begin to fade. You look at the Transformer, the Transformer Bay movies kept making more and more money until they didn't anymore. You look at the Fast and Furious movies. They were making a ton of money, and then suddenly you get to 8. I think it was 7 or 8, and then it began to drop off. You saw a point of diminishing return. But when it comes to the Star Wars trilogies, the sequel trilogy kind of followed the same trajectory. The first one made a bunch of money. Last Jedi made a little less money, and The Rise of Skywalker made a little less money. But it still was an absolute success. Choosing a Rey film, which, again, I firmly believe this is going to be an episode 10. I said it before on a previous podcast several weeks ago that makes the most financial sense, in my opinion, being that that's what people are most familiar with. We're going to have 6 or 7 years between The Rise of Skywalker and whatever this next film is. You keep with that which people know more. Having Daisy Ridley come back makes sense to me based on the fact that the complaints about The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker were not around the Rey character. Apart from those that want to argue the Mary Sue angle, which I always just thought was absolutely lame, and certainly has been answered now, whether you like it or not, with her being a Palpatine. The other part to this is, they have their own set of information that they can pull from. They have their own data they can look at in terms of the popularity of this particular character. And also you have to consider age groups and the younger audience that went to go see these films with their parents that will be 6, 7 years older by the time this next movie comes out. And Rey, Daisy Ridley, is an important actress and character for them. So these things matter when they're making these film decisions. And if they want to guarantee a certain level of interest to a movie rather than bringing in a whole fresh new slate of characters, it makes sense that they would go and bring in Daisy Ridley's Rey. Irene Davis, friend of the show, writes, just looking forward to all the new movies, especially episode 10. Daisy has also signed up for a great new action movie directed by a former James Bond director. All love, all things Jedi. Also, dead excited about Dawn of the Jedi. I have purposely been staying away from certain YouTube channels as the hate is cranking up again for my favorite heroine. Disgusting. So I also love Avatar. Me too. And I hope the delays are not too long. Me too. By the way, I watched Flash, and again, the same spectacle before any storyline. Crazy, you have to have several brains to follow the plot. Thank you for your podcast, Irene. I really enjoy Avatar, too. I recently picked up The Way of Water just the other day. I'm looking forward on Blu-ray. Looking forward to watching it this weekend. And I saw an interview, or was it one of the... No, it was one of the, on Disney Plus. I'm looking forward to watching all the bonus material on the Blu-ray for Avatar. But on Disney Plus, they had a couple of little documentaries, like 8 minutes long, for The Way of Water. And James Cameron was talking about making the new films, and he actually said when they were writing when they were starting the production and he was writing the next Avatar movies, he told everybody, let's do Star Wars. Not in terms of the storytelling, but in terms of telling an arc. He's like, let's tell one big story broken up with these smaller micro stories over the course of, 3 or 4 films. And that's the way I felt watching The Way of Water. Watching The Way of Water was one of the first times that I was watching a piece of content that wasn't Star Wars that was giving me that, I really want to learn more about this type of vibe. And seeing this new world open up and seeing it expanded, and now hearing James Cameron talk about how, on Earth we have all these different biomes. You've got water, you've got the forest, you've got the desert, you've got you've got the Arctic. It makes sense that you would have these on Pandora too. So we'll be visiting other parts of Pandora and experiencing these different Na'vi cultures in these different climates. And I'm really, really excited for that. And as I mentioned in my other podcast, Avatar is kind of doing what I said. You don't really know and hear much about the production, certainly not any problems on the production. You kind of just hear that it's going to be coming out, and you don't really get much information until the promotion starts. We're not inundated with all kinds of ancillary product and content around it, and so it ends up creating this new and special, unique world. Now, I will say before I wrap things up, getting back to that commentary, and thank you for the comment, Irene. The Last Jedi, that was a film that did not have any controversy following it, right? Everybody was looking forward to The Last Jedi. The big question mark was what was Rian Johnson going to do? So you're always going to be in a situation of how is the audience going to receive the film, right? So this kind of pushes back a bit on what I was saying in terms of not putting out too much information. Now, granted, there just wasn't any problems to report with The Last Jedi, and so there wasn't any ideas to form about what this film was going to be beyond what we had already seen in The Force Awakens. And, of course, we know the controversy that erupted out of that. I will say that I do not think the controversy to that film would have been nearly as strong and wouldn't have sustained itself for as long as it did if it wasn't for social networking and for YouTube and for people making a lot of money going and bashing that film. If the internet wasn't around and The Last Jedi came out, you would have had articles written, but I don't think you would see this sort of community that is so rabidly anti-Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi. I could be wrong, but you know what the cool thing is? You're never going to know because that's not going to happen. That's why they call it a hot take, or that's just why they call it a take. All right. That wraps up the show for this week. I expected this to be a lot shorter, but it wasn't. So if this is one of your first times listening, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. I'm also an author, along with a guy that goes blah, blah, blah behind a microphone. I've written a science fiction space opera series. If you read, you obviously like science fiction space operas. And if you like them to be epic, filled with some romance and action, then EMBARK is perfect for you. It's written for adults, but great for ages 11 plus. You're not going to find anything in the books that is going to throw you for a loop. Think Star Wars in terms of content. Good versus evil, right versus wrong, strong family values, no language, and no sex. How's that? 7 books in all in the series, available in ebook, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook as well. Book 1 in the EMBARK series goes as follows. Keitha's father died 1 year ago. Yesterday, he gave her the key to saving humanity. She just doesn't know it yet. Taft Guardia picked the right day to upgrade his ship after fellow pilot Keitha Morrow received a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father. What he thought was a routine investigation quickly turns into a dangerous journey of discovery and survival when an industrial accident sets off an apocalyptic chain of events. As a corporate madman with an armada at his disposal attempts to gain control of the global evacuation, they discover what may be the only hope of stopping him. The clock is ticking as Taft Keitha and a ragtag squadron of pilots fight to save Earth's evacuees from annihilation and secure their future among the stars. It's a fast-paced and action-packed epic space opera series about how humanity ends up taking to the stars and those that fight for their survival across the stars. I hope you will go and check out my EMBARK series. It's available on Amazon, also Kindle Unlimited, so you can go and download it on Kindle Unlimited. Amazon.com, search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, or you can head on over to mynerdworld.net. I have paperbacks that I can sell direct as well. So if you're interested in buying paperback versions of any of the 7 books in the series, I have a whole bunch of paperbacks here at home, ready to be signed and shipped to you. No increase in sales apart from like $5 for the shipping. And I don't charge extra either for autographed books either, and they can be specialty autographed. So if you would like to purchase paperbacks from me directly, just email me talkshownerd@gmail.com. Let me know which book or books that you want, and I will send you all the details and make it super easy. You can pay through PayPal, and I can get them shipped within a matter of a few days. So if you're interested in buying the paperback versions of the EMBARK series, again, just email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Happy to go and sign them for you as well, and I can get them to you in just as short a time as a few weeks. So, talkshownerd@gmail.com if you want to buy the books directly from me. Thank you so much for checking out this week's podcast. As always, I hope wherever you are happy, you're healthy, and you are safe. And I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My Nerd World.